Is There No Balm in Gilead by Dorota Philipzak in 1995. A brief overview of this article is that throughout this article, Philipzak explores the novel through a biblical lens, connecting many different events and themes to biblical events and stories, trying to convince the reader that these connections are not mere coincidences. So the key points are Atwood's vision of the Bible centered society addresses the patriarchal abuse embedded in biblical texts. Another one is that Atwood sees the Bible as the text that constitutes a closure for interpretive possibilities. So different connections and ideas can be viewed in different perspectives that the reader chooses. Another one is the Book of Hosea parallels the idea of infertility throughout the novel. And the last one is that Offred's name and actions parallel Eve in the Bible. So this is my first quote, which is found in the second paragraph of the first page. This quote refers to the biblical figure of Jacob, who is later renamed Israel. In the Old Testament, this figure is often depicted as the head of a household with significant authority over the family, including the wife and children. The reference suggests that the societal norms of male dominance and female subjugation in the Handmaid tale are rooted and justified by these biblical stories. Another idea is that Paul's first letter to Timothy refers to a text from the New Testament in the Bible, where the Apostle Paul writes to Timothy, which refers to the passage where Paul discusses gender roles and hierarchy within the church, which can be interpreted as advocating for male leadership and authority over women. I agree with this connection because the book does in fact foster male domination and female object status. However, I disagree in which the societal dynamics in the book are solely based on biblical lenses. Another disagreement is looking further at an understanding of Paul's teaching, which emphasizes gender equality and mutual respect among genders. This is my second quote, which is found on the seventh paragraph of the fourth page. So, the biblical story of Israel's apostasy, particularly their worship of the idol Baal Peor, leads to divine punishment. Hosea states a curse from God, which includes a lack of fertility among the people as a consequence of their unfaithfulness. The passage suggests that Atwood's portrayal of a society obsessed with procreation and reproduction mirrors the curse described in the book of Hosea, where despite efforts to promote infertility or to promote fertility, there is an underlying theme of infertility and failure. I agree that in both cases, the inability to conceive or bear children is seen as a direct result of societal disobedience. However, I disagree in the way that infertility and reproductive challenges in Gilead are not a consequence of divine punishment. Instead, they point to other factors such as environmental degradation, societal manipulation, or scientific interference. This is my third quote, which is found on the first paragraph of the fifth page. So the passage compares the conditions described in the book of Hosea and Gilead. In the novel, sterility and food shortages result from environmental contamination caused by nuclear fallout, leading to a gradual decreation process similar to Hosea's prophetic visions. This suggests that Gilead's downfall is not just political or social, but also environmental and spiritual, paralleling the themes of divine judgment and annihilation found in Hosea. I agree with a statement because the environmental decay of both stories mirror each other. However, I disagree in which the Handmaid's Tale, sterility, and environmental degradation have alternate explanations beyond divine judgment and degradation. Factors such as human greed, environmental exploitation, and scientific manipulation once again could play a significant role instead. This is my fourth quote, which can be found on the third paragraph of the fifth page. Gilead's totalitarian regime presents a corrupted interpretation of biblical teachings, using religion as a tool to maintain power and control over the population while claiming to pursue a noble and righteous goal. I agree in which the regime uses religious language, symbols, and narratives to justify its oppressive policies and maintain its social order by twisting religious writings to serve their own interests and justify oppression. This is my next quote. And this statement suggests that Gilead serves as a caricature of the concept of a messianic state. While the messianic state is typically associated with the ideas of justice, righteousness, and divine favor, Gilead is portrayed as a dystopian society characterized by oppression, injustice, and manipulation of religious ideology. The statement also suggests that the political and military events leading to the establishment of Gilead, including the destruction of the former country, reflect in the biblical concept of the Day of Yahweh. The Day of Yahweh is a biblical motif associated with divine judgment and intervention in human affairs, often depicted as a time of reckoning and restoration. I agree with the distorted representation of Gilead as a messianic state because of their polar opposites. However, I disagree in the fact that giving divine significance and comparisons to the events of the Day of Yahweh and the uprising of the Gilead regime seems too far fetched. I, under, I understand the Day of Yahweh as leading humankind to a better future, not a worse one, as the novel suggests. This is my sixth quote, which is on the first paragraph of the seventh page. This references the Bible to show the absence of spirituality and divine connection in Gilead. This absence weakens Gileadite society's claims to righteousness and exposes its leaders' manipulation of religious ideology for their own benefit. Gilead lacks spiritual presence and divine influence. Despite the society's claims to be founded on religious principles, there's no true connection to a higher power. Also, Gilead claims to be based on Messianic principles. However, the absence of God reveals that these claims are false or deceitful. The subquote, the Old Testament prophets see the absence of God as an expression of his wrath, refers to a theme in the Old Testament where the absence of God is interpreted as a punishment or expression of anger towards a people. This statement suggests that the lack of God's presence in Gilead signifies divine disapproval or judgment. This is my seventh quote, and which can be found on the third paragraph of the seventh page. In the novel, women's financial dependence on men further reinforces their subordination. In Gilead, women's property rights are gone, and they are economically reliant on men for their livelihoods and security. This financial dependence reinforces their lack of autonomy and control over their own lives. The passage states a parallel between the way women are defined by men in Gilead and the biblical story of Adam naming Eve. In the Bible, Adam names Eve is derived from the Hebrew word of is, meaning man or husband. Similarly, in Gilead, handmaids' names such as Offred, Offglen, Offwarn are derived from their commanders' names and are examples of how women are stripped of their own individual identities. I agree in which the parallels between women in Gilead and Eve are eminent because their names are both derived from the men who are controlling them. However, I disagree. Though there are parallels between the naming of Eve and the women of Gilead, it is not direct parallel to the naming of handmaids in Gilead. The naming of handmaids serves as a tool of dehumanization and control by the regime, not just possessiveness. This is my eighth quote, which can be found on the fourth paragraph of the seventh page. And the author suggests that Offred is persuaded into adopting a role similar to that of Eve from the biblical story. In the story of Adam and Eve, Eve's actions and the persuasion by the devil lead to the consumption of the forbidden fruit, resulting in their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. In the context of the novel, the comparison to Eve implies that Offred is tempted to step outside the limits of her role as a handmaid in the society of Gilead. This temptation shows in her involvement in engaging in a sexual relationship outside of the one with her commander. I agree in which the parallels between Eve and Offred are evident here because they are both led by temptation. Both of their actions are surveyed by higher figures. And lastly, the key insights. So the key insights are Atwood purposely incorporated biblical elements to show the misusage of religion. And it gives an example of religious justification through oppression and horrible things done. And lastly, the symbols of naming enrich the themes of the novel.